Hello and welcome back to our study of worship and the worship service. At the end of the last video, a suggestion was made that we could look at the 20 or so verses that mentioned worship and think about how worship was described there, and then think about how we think about worship, or the mental image that we get when we use or hear the word worship. I hope you did that. I certainly did. My experience when I hear or use the word worship is to think of a Sunday morning worship service. That's how the word is typically used in my upbringing and in my life. When I think of a Sunday morning worship service, I think of coming together to sing and to pray and to hear a sermon, to take the Lord's Supper together and take up a collection. Those are the things that are done in a Sunday morning worship service. So that's the mental image I come up with, although that doesn't necessarily look like the things that we looked at in the 20 verses or so in the previous video. So let's dive into this a bit more. Let's look at the word that has been translated worship in our Bibles, both from a Greek and a Hebrew standpoint. Let's look at that word and see what the definition of that word is as we continue to dive into this a little bit. The Hebrew and Greek words translated worship in our Bibles simply mean to bow down, to lay prostrate, or to kiss the hand of as we bow down to someone. It's a simple meaning, if you will. In other words, to worship is to physically signify that you're showing respect or honor to someone. To do something to make sure they know that they recognize that, and you want them to see that. So that's simply put how the word in either Hebrew or Greek, the original meaning. In the Bible, these words are translated in either one of two ways. The first way is that when the word is used in reference to another person, the words used in our Bibles today are bow down, that this person bowed down before the other person. When one of those words from Hebrew or Greek are used in reference to Jesus or to God, our Bible uses the word worship. Now it's the same word, but when it's towards another person, it's translated bow down. When it's toward Jesus or God, it's translated worship. In the English dictionary, the word worship is defined what appears to be more like how we typically use the word today, closer to that than the original Greek or Hebrew word. That definition says the ceremonies, prayers, or other religious forms by which love and devotion is expressed. So ceremonies and prayers are other religious forms. It opens the door to a lot of other options, a lot of other activities or physical gestures than just bowing down, which is perhaps in line with all the things that we do when we think of worship, but different from what we see in the original Greek and Hebrew words. So that's the definition of worship. So what does a Sunday worship service look like? Since we call it a worship service, I would suggest to you that the answer to the question, what does a Sunday worship service look like, depends. It depends on the church you attend. Some churches have a choir, some a piano, some a huge majestic organ, some an entire band. Others go so far as to have lights or other devices such as artificial smoke machines to add drama. They make a production out of it. In some churches, you'll see a small, low-key podium that is used by whoever's leading prayer or preaching the sermon. In others, you'll have a full-size stage with lots of lights and decorations and backdrops and no telling what else. So what does Sunday morning worship service look like? Depends on where you go. And there are churches, a number of them, many of them, that don't use any musical instruments or special lighting or other effects and don't have choirs and bands. So again, it depends. But regardless of which one of those you attend, my experience is that they all have something very much in common. And that is how they talk about their worship service. I've talked to many people from many churches, and conversations include things like this. Well, these are the kinds of songs I like to sing. I prefer these kinds of songs. That's one of the reasons we go where we go. This is the kind of sermon I like to hear. I like a sermon that's... Some people say, you know, I really don't like it when a preacher uses humor. That's the pulpit's no place for humor. Other people will say, I love it when the preacher uses humor. He makes himself relatable and he gets my attention. Some will say, I hate it when people clap during church. It's such a distraction. Others will say, I love it when people clap. It means they're into it, they're emotional, they're spiritual, it's lovely. Others may say, I just wish they'd find a quicker way to serve communion to everyone. It just takes so long and drags on. Some people will say, I love long, meaningful prayers. Others will say, just make the prayer short and to the point. Let's get on with it. We don't need to have another sermon and a prayer. Now that may not sound like I've displayed something common, but let me suggest there is something common in all of those. And that is, we talk about what we like. The worship service, the things in the worship service need to be to our preference, to our liking. Whether it's a big production or something small, we almost always talk about the worship service in terms of what we like. This leads me to what I believe are some serious questions. Is talking about what we like and shaping our worship services around what we like and our preferences, is that really bowing down and showing honor to God? Or is it perhaps time that we need to admit that we spend a lot of our time making our worship services what we like instead of spending effort to honor and show reverence to God? Some congregations have even gone to the point that they have a different type of worship service each Sunday morning. Some members go for the traditional worship service, and then after that or before that, whichever order, the others will come to the progressive worship service. I wonder if choosing not to come together in the unity that Jesus prayed that we would have, is that showing honor and reverence? Is that bowing down before God, or is that serving ourselves to the point that we can't even come together in unity? I wonder if our worshiping of God has slipped more into worshiping ourselves, doing what we like to do, what we find enjoyable, what our preference and comforts are, instead of what honors God. Some of you may say, Larry, you're making a big deal of nothing. So some people do it that, and some do it that way, another way. It's no big deal. Does it even matter? I want to suggest to you that it very much matters. It does matter. And we're going to continue to look at that and discuss why, in fact, it does matter in our future videos. I believe it's an important topic. I believe it very much matters, and I hope you'll join me as we continue on this topic. I hope to see you in the next video.